Uganda has perhaps the youngest population in the world, with 77% under the age of 30 years. Yet, many of its youth continue to stare at a bleak future as hope flickers like a mirage in the desert. With an acute employment peppered with a moral crisis and ailing economy, many youth are disillusioned. How can the youth offer leadership and sell a message that can gain traction with youngsters? On the spot tonight is a panel of 4, including Winnie Watera, Daphne Arinda, lawyers Andrew Karamaji, and Simon Senyonga. Gentlemen and lady, welcome to the show. You're on the spot tonight.
Good to be on the spot.
We'll also be joined, I suppose, later by Madam Arinda. Let me begin with you, Andrew. Why have young people been co-opted as pawns in the political destructive games or kind of projects, be it graft, be it immorality, and things like that? Yet when you look at other generations, 70s, 60s, and 80s, the young people stood up for things that mattered then and changed the course of the history. Not now. Why?
Well, the question is one that, as you framed it, is one that runs the risk of answering a consequence as opposed to what is actually the cause. Why do I say that? I say that because looking at our demographic that all of us on this panel belong to, we are not living in a vacuum. There's a history to us, and we've lived within a certain context of society, which then informs the kind of people that we generally are. Having said that, I think we can use 2 tools to answer your question. One tool would be sociological, the environment, the kind of upbringing, the education, or the lack thereof, the examples, or the lack thereof that we should otherwise look up to as a generation. And the second tool I would propose is a political economy tool. What do I mean? The statistic you've given is helpful to the extent that it shows us that we are the largest in terms of population in the country, 78%. What that statistic should also say is that half of the 78% of that 78% demographic is children below the age of 15. In terms of political economy, what that means is that a small percentile, 8.7 million Ugandans, young people who are employed, are catering for more than half of their own age bracket. So you have a huge dependency ratio.
A demographic challenge.
A demographic challenge. And that if we're growing at the rate of 3.2%, which is, if you look at the recent census and figures by the Bureau of Statistics, that's what it will tell you, that we're growing at an exponential rate. Putting those 2 together, sociological and political economy, also the question of leadership, who have been our leaders, what kind of people do we look up to, what kind of people are in charge of this society. If they behave a certain way, then we should conclude, I suggest to you and the viewers, that leaders shape the culture. So if young people are behaving a certain way, I think we should look at our leaders in addition to the sociological and political economy questions that I have posed.
Now, considering the numbers, Mr. Senyonga,
yes,
in Uganda today of young people, which is big, and looking at other examples in Africa. In fact, Professor Lumumba the other day was looking at giving us a challenge that in the Arab Spring happened because the young people became angry and positively angry. And if you look at even in South Africa, during the Soweto uprising, the young people became angry. Patrice Lumumba, when he tried to change the Democratic Republic of Congo, then Zaire, he was angry, positive anger. So was Dr. Milton Obote and Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah and Yoweri Museveni. Why is it that we cannot find that kind of positive anger. People who are going to sacrifice and think about their country, be nationalistic in thinking, and get in and do the job that can be done. Because are we now not well groomed? Lacking examples?
Well, you see, Patrick, the challenge really, for me, is not the lack of the positive anger. In fact, that is only a part of what shapes the destiny of a nation. Now, what the broader perspective in shaping a nationalistic view, from the examples you have cited, let us look at, for example, South Africa, at the time of the Sharpeville shootings. The passion was not just the positive anger of the young people, but the broader picture of setting aside a colonial tendency that had sidelined the general populace. When you look at the Arab Spring and its rise, it wasn't just about the young people, but a dictatorial regime that had swept across all the way from Algeria up to Libya, and even any other parts. Now, even in Uganda, what really informed the current leaders to go to the bush, at least as of then, it was the need to liberate the country. Now, obviously, with the current trend, there's a shift of goalposts as to whether there was a true liberation or there was no true liberation, and whether we are still a liberated regime or we are under a tyrannical regime. So a combination of all those factors do not simply point towards a positive anger, but the limited vision of very many young people. Because you see, the general discussion around is focused on Museveni, focused on change of regime. But there are broader perspectives that inform a successful, legitimate, and relevant change of systems and government. Vision. Now, obviously, that is putting history, you're reading history in the lens through which you want it to be. Now,
as written by the victors.
Yes, as written by the victors, not actually the victims.
Yeah.
You get it.
And I could help, thank you. Just to say that I think we don't have a shortage of visions. When someone, if you look at the amount of apps development, apps for mobile phones, the amount of talent that is exhibited in art galleries, or in music, or in writing, or in so many fields of human endeavor, it's clear that we don't have a shortage of aspirations, of visions, or whatnot. The problem, and if I could use the analogy of a fish in a fish tank, is that the fish is so big, it cannot fit in this little tank and needs to be placed in a tank that can allow it to swim, because right now it's just wiggling and going nowhere. What do I mean when I talk about a fish tank and a fish that has grown too big and needs to be released so that it can realize its potential? Young people are starting businesses every other day, and then they arrive at, they get to their mortality before they can be, they get to their mortality before a year is done. Young people are struggling with their talents, sports development or music or poetry, any of that, but it cannot be brought out because the environment, the tank within which they are, is so limited to allow for the full exploration of that potential. So it's not a lack of vision or aspirations.
Winnie, I have seen a culture of us here in Kampala, especially the young people, celebrating the Kampala socially. I don't want to mention names, but when the guy comes up with the top of the Range Rover or Audi latest model, and maybe he buys some booze in a bar, and that becomes the story, and we celebrate that. But when Irene Como puts to task the American president, telling him, you know what, we don't need your aid. We need to trade with you. That story is covered somewhere. When Andrew Karamagi tells the judiciary or somewhere it is that, look, things are supposed to be like that, then maybe the story dies the following morning. When Anna Deke Because a young person sits in parliament and said, things should be like this, probably should not follow. And so is Nyanjura and everybody else. But if it is a Bernard White or whoever it is, and he does what he could, then the socialite is celebrated. The guy with the application you're talking about, the person who is turning around the world of agriculture, nobody will follow them. And yet, that is what is going to change and add value to our communities.
I guess I could pose the same question to you as the Fourth Estate. You are the people who blow these people out of proportion. When Irene Ikomu told the President Obama that she wanted...
Winnie, you are seated on the chair because I had to go through a lot to say the youth's voice, and not necessarily the youth that are elected. Random people who have been to school and young can come and sit. That's my answer to you.
Well, I guess, in my own opinion, the youth of Uganda are disillusioned. The point where we've reached, there's nothing to aspire to. Like he said, the fish and in the tank and it's wiggling. We basically don't know where to go from here. We are in a space where our political leaders have told us, you can only be this. Even though we aspire to be more, we cannot break through certain ranks. So I guess the only option that we are left with is to socially, to root ourselves into things that we believe uplift us, the stuff that make us feel better about ourselves. There was a study on social media that said the way social media is detrimental to the young people in Uganda or across the globe. What our friends put up online is what we aspire to be. We don't aspire to be more than that. And if a young person is only limited to what they see, I don't think they're going to aim higher.
But you know what I've seen, Winnie, is that you have decided to be the bridesmaids to accompany the old guard in your political journey, and that's it. And sometimes you lack that political gravitas on your own to say, let's take them on, even when you have the numerical strength on your side.
I think that is very simplistic in my opinion. If the old guard have put in place checks that will limit us. For instance, in the political arena, the recently passed laws regarding to elections, did you see the prices that were, did you see the fees that were put to get nomination forms? It's about 3 million. How many young people can afford this amount of money to just get nomination fees? That is even beside the amount of money that has to be put into the elections. Our elections are very monetized. So if I, an unemployed youth, walk in the streets of Kampala, hope to make change through maybe the legislature and can barely break through the ranks, I think our voice will be stifled in.
Simon, it's a question of the Benjamins. It's the money, is it?
Well, that's one side of the story. But you see, the political gravitas, as you put it, and the overturning of an electoral system, for example, is not only focused on numbers. There are very many things that happen in the pipeline way beyond the numbers. One of the things is the legislative and the institutional framework or the policy framework that is put in place. The different checks that are put against the young people. But you see, again, that discussion for me is very, very limiting. When you read the book of the president, concerning the Bush War history, and even the one of...
the recently edited version? Or
well, I think all versions have always been edited, some of and even the one of Brigadier Matayo, Charlie Gonza. You realize that their discussion came from a front beyond just change power, and beyond the fact that they had the numbers. There was a whole process, one of rejuvenation, and I would put it even what we would call political cleansing, ideologically. So somebody would think much more clearly, as opposed to a young person today who has been reduced to only
next meal.
Money and, the next meal and, get the token here and, all this. Now, you'll find very few young people of our caliber who can inform very serious discussion.
I think those books, you need to read them better if you also read them alongside the book of Dr. Kobusinje.
Yes, and I've read the one of Dr. Kobusinje.
The Correct Path.
Yes.
And maybe the other of Major Kazora, Betrayed by My Leader. So that maybe you can put that in context.
I was fortunate enough to have read almost all of them, except for the more recently written ones. But for like Mr. Museveni's books, Sowing the Mustard Seed, Odonga Ori Amaza's biography of him, autobiography of him called Museveni's Long March, From Guerrilla to Statesman, and the much earlier one about what Africa's problem is, a question being posed, what is Africa's problem? And then his thesis at Dar es Salaam University about Frantz Fanon and the theory of violence, etc.
Theory of violence.
But in those books, you notice that there was an ability which they've unfortunately undone. What am I talking about? Many of them, this current guard, you hear they're professors, they managed to excel, not because they were from families that were privileged, but because the systems then did not reduce education into a commodity like it is today. Education was a social amenity available for all. In fact, older people tell you that the district paid for your transportation. You only got a coupon, and then you have the fee to take you to school, and then the same fee to bring you back at the end of the term.
Today it is universal.
Today.
It is universal and free.
Yes, let me quote a scandal that has happened between 2005 and 2012. Just one example of one group of young Ugandans. 1.5 million children, according to an Uwezo report, enrolled for UPE in 2005. At the end of 7 years, which is 2012, only 500,000 sat, not passed, sat for PLE. If you project and stretch it to how many could have sat S4 out of that same group, how many could have sat for S6, and then finally go to university, based on the fact that we have 40,000 students graduating every year, it shows you that we can't account for over 1 million people in a mere space of about 15 years. What kind of young person do you want to come out of that?
Being Uganda, they could have been ghost pupils from the very beginning.
Well, we don't have to conclude that they are ghosts if we see the kind of crime, the kind of tools of violence that are available to be used for whatever purpose. And so it's to that extent that I would even dare say that we, the three who are on this panel tonight, are not very good examples of the average young Ugandan. We have been fortunate enough, by providence or for other reasons, to go through a system that eliminates over 1 million people by the time you get to university. That's not the case that the older guard enjoyed. They became what they are because systems worked. We are now pushing through. We are pushing through impossibilities to make it even to where we are.
Yeah, but that's why I'm asking Winnie and I'm asking Simon and you that when system didn't work then, there were some individuals who stood up and inspired other people, and somehow things changed. But now it looks like when systems are not working, well, we have our phones, you just go and start chatting. It's not a bad thing. Maybe you just go and start baiting. It's not a bad thing. Maybe you just go and start telenovelaing. It's not bad. And that takes our eyes off the ball of things that seem to be so serious when it comes to national building and forging a future for our country.
The first one, Andrew makes a position that actually the three of us may not be the most legitimate representation of the young people out there. And obviously, he says maybe fortunately or unfortunately we have been favored by the system. Now, some of us really have reason, we're not limited by the systems. It's really by the grace of God that some of us are here, not any of these systems. But that's really one side of it. The other thing, let us interrogate the question of the education system. Accountability cannot only be limited to how many numbers you churn out, but even the potentialities and the abilities of the citizenry that go through the education system. Now, again quoting from the reporter, the Wezo report, the Taweza report, I think.
Yes.
That talks about the nature of education, which only focuses on you passing. At the end of the day, you're judged in society based on how many grades you got. But the recognition of both the cognitive and non-cognitive abilities. the challenge of the young people in the country is a lack of juxtaposition of those two abilities. If a young person cannot be built to think creatively and also given the adequate skills to manage what they have thought about creatively, then the system cannot really contribute so much to that. But secondly, again, that simple question, creative arts, for example. A young person, creative in music, makes a new song, but the laws and policies, for example, intellectual property laws and policies, specifically copyright, do not protect your creative abilities because there is a very big gap therein.
The same report actually goes ahead, Patrick, to say, to distinguish between cognitive and other abilities, that it is one thing. If you ask a student, what is 1 + 1? If that student says 4, they have understood the question, but they've gotten the answer wrong. If you ask what is 1 + 1, and the student says chair or table, they've not even understood what the question requires. So we even have a bigger crisis insofar as cognitive abilities of a system like this one, this education system, is concerned. That's why employers like yourselves here complain and I'm sure struggle to find the kind of quality graduates that you need to
cognitive
perform.
abilities, the same education kind of curriculum that the British left us in the 60s, by the way, they have changed it maybe 5 times since then, was producing people of a certain quality and a certain caliber then, but how come now it is not?
What were the teacher-student ratios?
So you see the other things.
What was the quality of instruction?
Okay, I do not want us to focus really on even blame the education system alone. And
it's just one of, yes.
But I just also want you to shed a light in your own generation. For example, my producer here is telling me, youth can only deliver the Holy Grail if they are disciplined and have good morals. He says, yet today we see youth worship alcohol, drugs, pernicious Western lifestyle, corruption, and opulence. What would you say?
What's morality?
Isn't morality subjective?
Yeah.
Who decides what's moral and what's not?
It's a problem.
Simon, is it Simon?
Definitely, it is God, and the priority really.
We have a Christian fundamentalist.
Yeah, and that is well, that is very, very clear. You know, my views are very strong, especially.
That's why I'm saying Christian fundamentalist.
Now, exactly, the question of morality is very, very key because it shapes the fiber of the being, and even the system you quote, the previous education, the British system, it really focused, again, it was based on foundations of religion. And ideally, our detachment from the Creator will make us always think that we can really live a life beyond God is not relevant and all these things. So you'll have that sort of independence, and you're looking for an attachment elsewhere, apart from where your true essence and value comes from. That is why actually the biggest crisis of the 21st century is not the economic crisis, it's not the political crisis, it's an identity crisis. People do not know their true virtue and who actually they are. And all that is always created the moment you detach yourself from the Creator. So Andrew and Winnie here may need to receive Jesus to really understand what
without necessarily.
I knew he would somehow go in that information, but he always does. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I will show you that in the 90s we had names. When we were back in school, you'd wait for maybe a Norbert Mao to come and speak to you, or maybe wait for a Nobo Mayombo to come and speak to you. I mean, whom are we waiting for? Who are the young people in school now, in SMAC, in Intari, in St. Leo's College in Nyakasura, looking upon the leaders of our generation could come and inspire them? We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara, and tonight we are focusing on the young people, and my guests this evening, all of them are young people. I have Andrew Karamagi, Simon Senyonga, Daphne Arinda, who just joined us, and Winnie Watera. And so let me begin with you, Daphne Arinda, in this segment, because you've just joined us. Thank you for honoring our invitation. We seem to have a generational crisis of leadership. In the 1990s, we had Norbert Mao, people like the late Nobo Mayombo emerge. who are the generation leaders today, who can speak to the young people in those big schools. If you went to Kitende or went to Ndeje or you went to SMAC or whatever school it is, you would think there's a leader who's maybe below 40, and when he comes to speak, you know, people can even miss a meal, their dinner, because they want to get something in their brain. Who are those?
In Uganda right now, I think that the language has changed, but the people are actually still talking. And I picked from the discussion that you guys had earlier about the artists that we have right now. We have vocal artists who are moving things and changing things. It's just that they're speaking a different language, different from what the Mayombos spoke. And the reason why they are speaking that language is because we don't have the political platforms to express ourselves the way the Mayombos did. So we use our art, we use our music, we use our social media. We change things, we shake things, but not in the usual language that you used to hear.
We disrupt.
And yeah, we do that because it's an alternative. The normal way is impossible. You think of joining parliament, but then you look at parliament and you're scared.
You stand on the spoken word, right? You're a poet, right?
Yes, yes.
And I like poetry, but I've also in the world of artists, I've heard the music. I listen to music, and what do I listen to? Songs, Kasepiki, Kawuji, and what is this? Yeah, Muliranwa. Yes, good songs, yes, but really.
Yeah, that is part of it. But then you also have Bobby Wine, who is singing political songs. You have different artists singing different political messages, and it might be crafted as Mulirwana, but deep down, if you're to go down into the layers, there's a political message in it. So I think that we have very good youth leaders right now. The only problem is that we are frustrated by the situation we're in. So if you're caught between a situation of making bread and butter or starving to death, you're likely to go for bread and butter. That's where we are right now. It's survival for the fittest. But the movement is going on, I believe.
I also think
yes,
the context has changed. When the Mayombos came out, I think the underlying issues were different from what was going on with us. For us right now, the times have changed. Try to go and put a rally in town and see how the police will rain down on you. Even the global watchdogs will say, oh my God, these children, there are some things that were permissible then that are not permissible now. So even going to the bush, when Mr. Museveni and his counterparts went to the bush, he was the golden boy. Let Karamaji,
supported by his fellow youth,
and try and take that step.
And this is why I'm going to ask this question. How can youth coalesce around their leaders to protest policies that don't favor them? Like President Museveni in his youth days sounded that clarion call
Actually,
to the battle trumpet.
The current situation...
And our battles could be corruption, could be, exclusion, and so many things.
The current situation, as is not one that should simply be protested.
Should be understood.
People have protested, and we've expressed our reservations in no uncertain terms. Where we need to go now, both to, I'm suggesting our panelists and our viewers, the young people watching the show, we need to take on this establishment, this monolith, remove it, and in its place establish a system that can deliver on the aspirations that we have. Because no amount of protest right now is going to resolve the current questions that we are grappling with. It is not possible in the current situation and state of affairs to have a return to normalcy, short of regime change or leadership change. That is not going to happen. So, yes, we should protest. I am one of those who, engage in those protests, but I'm also conscious about the fact that we need to organize. Over and above, you see, you can be a pile of bricks, 5,000 bricks. But that pile means nothing, even if there are 10,000 bricks. But when you organize those bricks into a structure, then they can provide shelter, they can be used for certain things. We need to go beyond that and organize, and both at the economic level, politically, and in all other forms of organizations in a superior fashion, that with certain values that define us about. Because, look, I also do not want person X for us to come to this show and say, you see, we have this person to be our leader, and then we fall in the same liberation trap. We've had enough of liberators. What we need now is a joint effort that brings everybody together, so that 20 years from now, we do not have person X telling us that, where were you when I was fighting? The liberator syndrome should also be dealt away with.
I'm just ping out from where Andrew says now, the liberator syndrome and the analogy of the 5,000 bricks and organized. I think there is
the analogy of I killed my animal.
Yes.
Yes. I'm not your servant. Of
Why are you skating around the thing?
I simply want to pick on his analogy.
Okay.
I think beyond just the organization and the bricks that are existent, the quality of the bricks also matters very, very much.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing for you to have organized young people, zealous, rigorous, and they are very passionate to go for the cause, but their quality is lacking. Number two.
Why is their quality lacking?
And that's
what's the
really
benchmark of quality? Who determines what is quality and what is not? If we're using the old people's benchmarks of quality, then obviously we are not of quality, because they have different benchmarks, and yet the benchmarks have changed, our times have changed, but they still want to use the same old. I had the morality question. You're not moral. When you go back to the question of what is moral, moral is if you're doing what you're told. If you're going to do what you're told, then you're going to do what the system wants you to do. But you need to rebel against that system.
I think, well,
and so you become unquality, you become something that is not of quality.
Are you suggesting this generation now is of better quality, that we have advanced?
It is very rebellious, and part of its rebellion is distancing itself away from this system that is failing us. And that's why we think that the youth are not participating, but it's a rebellious nature of why should I, when I'm going to be crushed in this system.
I think I want to re-emphasize
Winnie,
Andrew's point of a political economy analysis. I think it's important that we should look out for, we as young people, we should desist from the confrontation, because we have tried that. We have tried that and we have hit walls badly. Some of our colleagues, we don't know where they are, but I think we should conduct a political economy analysis, figure out who are the stakeholders. They don't have to be these big shots in political spaces, just key persons in who can get our message across, as long as they can, for lack of a better word, infiltrate the system. We look for ways to maneuver the system, because if we're going to use the same old ways.
Andrew, don't you at one moment as young people feel frustrated? And then, because Daphne is saying that, well, they're a bit rebellious and working hard, but I really see them as more as conformists with what is going on. You have to adapt or you die. And this generation, which is a jobless generation, has got to do more.
There are those who have chosen to conform, very unfortunately.
The majority are conformists.
And joined the majority are not conformists. The conformists are very few. And you could even count them on, people who, without naming, you are less than 40 years of age, even under 35, and you hold a ministerial position, but out of an entire group of people meeting somewhere in Chankwanzi, you are the one who tables a resolution to secure a sole candidature for someone who should be head of a faculty somewhere, retired and teaching about his political experiences. You can't be that kind of people. But before that, I wanted to say that it's that frustration that then you can do many things with frustration. You can resign, or it can power you to actually roll your sleeves up and do something about the situation. And just to add to the point that has been made by my colleagues here, it is scandalous that one of the leaderships, at least regimes that we've had, post-independence regimes we've had, the current one has perhaps the highest PhDs per capita, professorships and so on, prime ministers and all this, But the question is, how is it possible that this group of people who boast of all these, qualifications, if you're talking about quality, have spectacularly failed to deliver on questions as basic as healthcare? How is it possible that people who had opportunities to study free have created an education system that has reduced education into a commodity rather than a service that should be available for every child? in this country. How is it possible that we've sung solo with people of this sort? If the measure of quality is, if the yardstick is a comparison between myself and any other people in the current guard, I am happy to be labeled as unqualified and a rebel, because you must rebel against a situation like this.
About 8 years ago,
yes.
I hosted a gentleman here who passed on, and I revered him so much, the late Professor Ali Mazrui,
Yes.
on that chair. And he was telling me a story that whenever there would be, let's say, a talk at Makerere University, students then could even just miss their meal, their dinner. You'd find the auditorium full, everybody's waiting. And I was happy also to learn at the foot of another great man who used to be my uncle, the late Professor Kiki Mijaju. And he would tell me the same, that every time there would be a talk, people would just take a pause because they want to listen. There would be that yearning to expand your horizon of understanding things. Not anymore, Simon.
I think one...
Not anymore, Simon.
Yes, well, that's your view. And, well, you know, I don't really buy into one of the views raised by Andrew. You see, the argument that he makes that many young people tend to be frustrated, but how they use their frustration as either positive or negative energy can determine the path of this nation. Now, that's exactly where the problem is. Frustration cannot be a derivative power of our energies and an organized aspect of shaping the destiny of a nation. And I'll tell you why. The moment we as young people who espouse the values and virtues of what should be the nation fall back into what I would call the crybaby mechanism of, you know, we are frustrated, everything is wrong, this is just wrong, and there's nothing just to do. Then we fall into the same snare that actually those who went before us...
But Simon, you get frustrated with a problem.
And this is the...
And the problem, you work towards trying to solve a problem.
And this is what...
Frustration is because of that problem.
Let me just answer that question. You see, again, the argument I make is simple. Frustration cannot be a derivative aspect of our energies. As leaders, our biggest tool of trade, actually, is anchoring faith and hope into the people. Now, it really depends on the lens you put on. You can put on a lens that will clearly show you there is nothing and there is no hope, but actually, there is a very much clearer hope, if at all, we redefined who we are. Now, what has happened actually, yes, what has actually happened is that the discussion that happens is that what has the nation defined us to be? What has the system defined us to be?
I hate even to take you to your area, which is used to be biblical, because I know you're a fundamental Christian, fundamentalist.
But you see, I'm only putting the discussion in perspective and context.
But if I can just go there a little bit somewhere in the 2nd Chronicles, say, if people who are called by my name, call by my name,
shall humble themselves,
and humble themselves,
yes,
I will hear them from heaven,
yes, I
will heal their land.
Yes.
And I have seen you guys bent on the knees. Is he not hearing? Can't he hear our land?
Is Andrew humble, the one who posed the speech of a judge?
I think that's youth trying to use their frustration in a positive way. And maybe to respond to your question about why we don't have university students now interested in the debates and the discussions. For what? Why should I come to listen to a person who is going to tell me something and yet they're behind doors working, you know, with the same system that's frustrating us? So for me, that's why I insist that this apparent lack of participation should be a worry for the nation, because it's a rebellion in a way. It's the youth saying, what you are giving to us, we do not want, and we have found our alternatives, and that's why we have criminals coming up, criminal gangs. It is wrong, but if we want to solve that problem, then we have to go back and start listening or finding solutions to some of the problems affecting the youth.
Okay,
like
it looks like Daphne is giving us some hope, that look, the young people are watching you. We can see what is happening. You are sort of seated on a dormant volcano, and the days are numbered. Could that be the thing?
And yes, that's the case. And it's not. It might be misleading to say we do not know who we are or what it is that we want. We do not have the time, but many.
I've not said that, Andrew.
Okay, sure. Let me go ahead. Let me say
I don't
this.
want to have an avalanche of attack.
Let me put it this way.
70,000.
Let me put it this way. That
a legion of youth.
Yeah, look at this. We have proposals that have been made about tax reform. Split the country into tax zones, levy lower amounts of tax and then give back credits to companies that give internships to young people and so on. He's talked about intellectual property interventions that can be made to secure the intellectual labor and physical labor of young people. We've mentioned things about having a national health care insurance scheme, how education can be improved through computer-assisted learning, and all these things that other countries, our age mates in other countries, are doing. Our age mates are shining elsewhere. There's a Ugandan who has been nominated for an Oscar. Yeah. We have a Ugandan judge, Justice Nsereko, at the ICC. Even we have Solome. Even Miss Her Lordship Solome Balungi. They are shining out there.
There's Edward Kiruta,
yes,
who was into the genome sequencing kind of project, which is like big time.
Yes, I know another
understanding
one
the book of life.
The U.S. military laboratory, Fort Livermore. So it's not that we do not know what we want or who we are. Yeah. How do you propose in this current mess, when in the first weeks of a parliamentary sitting, a session of 5 years, the immediate thing that had to be done, that had to be proposed, in a country like this one that looks like this, the first order of business that the leader of government business had to present was a question on amending the constitution to create a life presidency. If in a situation like that, it does not matter what my colleague Anna Adeke or any other youthful MPs want to present in terms of national health care, or you would be speaking to a situation that really, so we know what we want and we are working towards it. We win some, we lose some, but I think the question should be is, are we moving forward? Are we investing in knowledge? Are we investing in training ourselves to have the discipline, the values that are required to actually deliver on these aspirations that we have?
All right. Winnie, is perhaps Uganda's high-octane politics so toxic for young leaders to emerge, and those with potential prefer? Can they see a lot of potential here to stay away? I honestly see a lot of potential here.
In my case, I choose to stay away from politics because I don't think I have the heart to tussle it out. I do not. And it's unfortunate on my part, and I'm very glad we have the Karamajis of this world, but it's so toxic. This environment is so toxic. It's really hard for so many young people to just actively engage.
Yeah, different from my sister here.
I can hear millions of Winnies talking in Uganda.
Just to say, yes.
And I'm thinking, okay, have we arrived yet? Or
different from her, and with respect, is just to say, even when I understand where she's coming from, it's certainly toxic. It's just to say, politics or public affairs is not a spectator sport. You can't remain in the stands and say you should have tackled this way, should have kicked the ball this way. It's one of those things where you have to roll your sleeves up and get into the game. No wonder Plato says the price that good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men.
That's the price.
I don't think we all have to be politically invested into this. I'm a policy analyst by profession.
I agree. Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree.
I will do whatever background check I need to do and feed you this information.
It's very helpful.
And that's a way of participating.
And that's a way of participating into the broader political.
Because what you earlier said was like, I'll stand by and watch and let it happen. And that takes you on the side of the other bad men.
I think I was misquoted.
She's participating.
Yes. I will do whatever data analysis I need to do to feed the Karamajis of this world to go until
you can get frustrated.
To go get frustrated, and I'll also be frustrated on my part because one of the problems we're facing as young people is our problem is not diagnosed really well. Like the employment problem.
Yes.
Everyone has their own statistic of the kind of employment. The national body will say 9.4. ADB, which is pumping money into the system, will exaggerate it to 83% unemployment rate. And it's just a myriad of a lot of things. You don't even know how to
put employment or
underemployment,
or you know.
We're not even talking about what is the root cause.
Yeah.
No one is talking about the demand. Okay, people are talking about the demand side of employment, but not as much as it's supposed to be. We're supposed to, like, for each point we get on the GDP, like 1%, we're supposed to create about 10,000 jobs. Uganda will create 400 jobs. When was the last time our GDP expanded exponentially? We have stagnated in a certain point, and then someone will come and tell us is there are not too many. They'll just coin up something and tell us.
Say Tulembeke or something, operation
yes.
to gather money.
People are pumping solutions into something we don't understand. What are the structural challenges in the system, in our education system, that can create a demand for employment? You're not going to tell me we don't have enough skills, like we don't have the skills that employers are looking for. There's just not enough jobs the other side. 3.2%
Growth.
is our growth. Every day we are giving, but our fertility rate is the same. Mortality rates have reduced. The population is exploding, and still
actually we add 1 million kids every year on our population. And
then
if you could exclude now the refugees who have also been coming in on biblical proportions from South Sudan and Congo, so we have so many people, but we can only have maybe about 60,000 to 90,000 jobs to be created.
Youth-specific information. It can also be said for the women. We don't have gender-specific data on very many things. You'll say women are unemployed, but we shall stop at that. We can't say this is the amount of women who were supposed to be in this kind of sector to cause change, to cause a shift. So I think there's an inherent need.
Okay.
Like
okay. It looks like you guys, you seem to see the problem. You seem to understand it and feel it. But when we come back from the break, I just want to ask you what you think you can propose to get to get us from the rough seas to the shores of calmer waters. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara, and my guests tonight are all young people. Daphne Arinda, Andrew Karamagi, Simon Senyonga, and Winnie Watera. And we're looking at, the situation of the young people in Uganda. What do they need to do, since they have the numerical strength, to change the course of our country? What would you suggest if we are like in the rough seas, and you're the captain, Senyonga? How would you steer us to the shore?
Now, obviously, I want to be president, and this is what I would suggest.
Yes, Your Excellency.
Yes. Now, the first thing is that the aspect of misguided priorities. Where exactly is the priority of the nation? When you look at the resources we have, you see, the expansion of our demography is not, so to say, it's a challenge, yes, but it can be flipped to be very, very important. Especially
into a dividend. I've heard everybody talk about a demographic dividend.
Yes,
but I don't see. I see a demographic catastrophe.
Yes.
Well, I will show you how this demographic dividend can actually be achieved. One of the things that we have all interrogated here is the question of the education system and the priorities of the education system. Whether we are focusing on churning out graduates and all these other people, or actually we are focusing on building abilities that can sustain a nation like this. Two examples come in mind. You see, in Uganda, for example, we may not have a replica of what would be like the Silicon Valley. Now, I'm privileged to be with
Cutway.
Where we are part of the youth tank, where we discuss and analyze policies and come up with ideas. But the spaces for these policies or these policy alternatives to be relevant is what is still lacking. Number two, when you take a critical look at the study, for example, of the US Navy, beyond just the qualifications for you to get there, one of the things they emphasize is a group of people called remote viewers. Now, these remote viewers focus on abilities which are derived power from an aspect of life called extrasensory perception, whereby you're trained to use your mind and your inherent energies. For example, sense. Yes, the sixth sense to locate an enemy. Now, I can assure you, I mean, I can put it to whoever is in the UPDF to show me some of these abilities being used. So what focus is now you go to Sandhurst, get some training here, come back, fight, and dispatched off, go for a guerrilla somewhere in Somalia and do all these things. So, two aspects for me. Refocus our priorities, the structural question of how we address the education system, focusing not just on results and grades, but also on the cognitive and non-cognitive abilities that can shape an individual to be wholesome.
Okay.
Yes.
There's an element. There are some people who are good at whatever they are doing.
Yes.
In some small cottage industries here and there. But then where are our children going for, young people going for apprenticeship, for example,
Yes.
so that they can hone their skill, understand something and be good and produce something? Because ultimately, I suppose, in my view, for things to change, this country must start to produce. I'll set an example of agriculture, because we already have a comparative advantage. We already have more than 50% of East Africa's arable land here. We have the Great Lakes region, freshwater lakes here. We have the longest river in the world starting here. Almost every river, I mean, every village has a river somewhere. So if we went into that, I think we can do it so well that the rest of our countries neighboring us cannot even compete, because everything is in our favor.
Yeah. Solutions. If it was in my place to suggest solutions, to stick with your question about your illustration of rough seas, I think, first of all, before we even get to any policy interventions and so on, for me, it's important that everyone appreciates the fact that there is a problem. We should not assume that everybody understands that this ship, MV Uganda, is actually sinking. This is why on any vessel, a plane or anything, there will be alarms sounded and spinning lights and all that to notify everyone that the situation is not normal. Let's brace for impact, find your life jackets and all that, which I think is critical. Because we have, and this is for our dear viewers out there, our age mates, that it's sometimes disturbing when you just sit by and watch someone as they get a newspaper, and before they read opinion pieces about what's happening in the world or the business section or something, or the headlines themselves, this person's immediate interest is what happened between, how a contest between two football clubs was resolved the night before, and what this means for the next transfer of this player and all that. Those things are important, they're not a problem, but I think that it's important to appreciate that, because you can't resolve a situation where those who are affected do not yet appreciate them. In mental institutions, the first line of treatment, because all these people are taken there, people with mental challenges and problems, are taken there kicking and screaming and saying, I am not mad. The first line of treatment always is to say, for this person to accept that they have a condition that needs to be treated or mitigated, or they need help, they need to be assisted. So
and I have an example, because I've taken two of my relatives to the mental hospital because they have abused drugs and alcohol. And I had to fight with them, saying, I'm not going to stay with these guys. He called them Dwanzes. I'm not going to stay with these fellows. I said, no, you have to stay here, because if you don't, you'll just be like them.
So having resolved that question, the one thing I would move to tackle very quickly is something that has been theorized and referred to as neoliberalism. And I'll just talk about three aspects of neoliberalism. One, the idea that you can deregulate the economy, liberalize the economy, and privatize statutory authorities and state enterprises and services, and farm them out to anybody, so that anyone can come to Uganda under the tag of foreign investor and call themselves, and sell phones, clean, push carts, produce, all this kind of thing. That reckless liberalization of the economy, which edges out Ugandans in terms of the competitive advantage. You go to a supermarket and find apples with logos from other countries, apples, or any other kind of fruits.
Orange from Egypt.
Oranges from,
from the desert.
From North Africa, from the desert.
Yes.
That kind of unrestricted, because for me, economy is a huge pillar for any society. If the economy is not in the hands of the people who inhabit that society, there's very little you can do about the politics and so on. So I'll tackle that question of, and then finally, this whole reckless privatization. We had cooperatives which ensured household incomes. Shelve this gimmick called Operation Wealth Creation and circles and what have you. Cooperatives, West Bulemezi, Banyankore Kweterana, the only surviving one, Bugisu Cooperative, those things ensured household incomes, they ensured people were in charge of their livelihoods. There was no, in fact, it is Ugandans who funded Ignatius Kangave Musazi, who led us then to independence through their own homegrown solutions. That's what I would do. One, get people to know that there's a problem, and two, do away with this neoliberal idea.
But now you said you do not believe what the solution that seems to be there, Operation Wealth Creation. Do you think they just don't get it? But the idea is there, they just don't get it, because I can imagine it is geared at trying to create wealth at the grassroots level, and I can see now those in charge want to bring parastatals back. I can see the cry of bringing Uganda Airlines back. I can see now somebody wants to revive big-time Uganda Railways. I can see the cooperatives now, they want even Ministry for Cooperatives is even there. So perhaps the Uganda hotels will be back.
Yes, your sister newspaper, NTV, in the Nation Media Group.
The Daily Monitor.
Yes, the Daily Monitor today has an editorial by the editorial team, and it's talking about Operation Wealth Creation. In their own language, they've said these people are sleeping on the job, because fundamentally it is not possible for no society has progressed from handouts. What young people are asking for is not handouts. No way. Like you quoted Irene Okomo earlier, there should be affordable energy. What's the energy tariff? We've handed out our energy, electricity, to a private firm. They are not here to do charity. Two, what are the taxes that are slapped on someone operating a small business, trying to make it a salon, or someone trying to provide a small service? The environment is one that defeats.
Okay.
And so
I'm going to be opening the line so that the young people who are listening to fellow young people like you, maybe they'll have some questions, or maybe they have some solutions or ideas to give on this show, like we always do. But you talked about the issue of energy, and I hear now we have extra 100 megawatts of power. I
can explain the problem.
Yes,
there's a serious problem. On that
but then, God willing, in the next 1 year, we'll be having extra maybe 500 megawatts.
Do you know
and
what the
God
problem
willing,
is?
we'll be having 700 mega.
You know what the problem is?
Yes, I think I know, but we could illustrate it better.
Let me put it this way: the tariff, the cost of a kilowatt of power is so high. One, because of the privatization problem, but two, because these companies are not here for
the agreements that were signed.
And if you look at the quality of the agreements that were signed, the kind of clauses that are there, let me add this to that. The problem is not surplus of electricity. You can actually build 10 more Karumas or 10 Bujagalis. The problem is the purchasing power of this economy, the Ugandans that you're dealing with.
If we can't afford the
currently, our economy is heavily externalized. What do I mean? If you remove multinational capital, Shell, Total, MTN, which sector is not foreign?
And the banking sector.
The banking sector, the hotel chains, all these things. If you remove the donor money that...
And the supermarkets.
And donors and what have you. If you remove all that, what is left that you can call an economy that belongs to Ugandans? And so the energy question is being misrepresented by talking about surplus power, because the problem is not the power or the lack thereof.
Well,
it is the cost.
Okay, you actually looked at a different problem in
Have you
power.
seen power lines running over districts going to Rwanda?
What Andrew, I'm looking at a problem in the surplus power is actually different.
Yes.
It's a problem of us Ugandans to be able to pay for that surplus power. No. Even when we're not using it.
We are paying for it.
Yeah,
you're right.
We're going to pay for the surplus.
Yeah. We pay for everything that's generated.
Because whoever produced it has a clause that you've got to pay for it.
Yes.
But we're paying for it at an exorbitant fee, even though we're not using it.
That's correct.
And I think that's going to be a big issue. But let me ask what Ugandans have to say tonight. I'm taking the very first callers online. I have a call online. Hello? Hello? Okay, let me try just one more. I have a call online. Hello? Okay. So, as they come in, the problem for me I've seen, because power is so central to the development of the economy, because without power you cannot produce, you cannot be able to compete. But maybe the chairman of the AU, is he chairman of the AU now? I don't know what the role is, but President Paul Kagame recently at the AU conference in Addis Ababa said, we are not going to take the technological way of South Korea and Singapore and all that. probably will let us use the things that we have, our environment, our agriculture and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Are we likely to see young people get into that and maybe change the world of agriculture? Because clearly, I think we still have a fighting space in there.
I think one of the solutions that, again, have to focus towards that is the nature of land management, the land question in this country. Because even energy will focus back on the country, the tenure systems that we are having. The most predominant being the customary land tenure system. And you know the inadequacies we have in the law in regards to its protection. Now, even it will be terrible when you set up a commission to investigate the land, the rot in the land, the Uganda Land Commission and all these aspects, and how you get back to say how even government will almost get to an extent of not funding
The commission.
just to frustrate the work, or even getting some hostile people as witnesses, like some guy who is a minister, and they will be extremely hostile towards this, and they will, in essence, downgrade the value and the work. And even the broader question of as to whether the report will be made or it will be made to favor a particular side, or even if it's made with its authenticity, it will never be considered as a viable option.
We don't have a very good history of commission of inquiries being set up and doing some job, and then at the end of the day, the recommendation being followed. You can go back up from the police inquiry into the army and the junk helicopter scandal, the police and so many things. At the end of the day, they are shelved and they are gathering dust. So I suppose even that will...
We need a commission of inquiry into commissions of inquiry.
For me personally, I think that that solution that we're looking for is we need organic civil society, because all of these problems, we are so much aware about them, we know what causes them, but the problem is how are we handling them. We have failed to handle them as a group because we don't have something that unites us. So, politics doesn't unite us anymore. So the only alternative right now is for civil society. We need to have a civil society that looks at Ugandan problems and finds solutions that are applicable to our problems. For instance, the price of electricity. If you know Ugandans don't have enough spending power to, spending capacity to purchase that electricity, and the cost of supplying that electricity is too high. You have solar. In my village, we don't have electricity, but different families now have solar, and this is on their own. So what if the government actually picked interest in this as a solution that works? Employment.
I think
we don't need new jobs to be created. We just need for the government to make the systems in place possible for us. If I open up my shop today, how has the government protected counterfeit products from coming onto the market? How has it protected these fake investors from coming onto the market to compete with me? So we don't need you to dish us solutions. We just need structures to change. And the only way we can change it is by having civil society.
I will lean a little to the policy angle. It's a dualistic. We have our part to play. The government has a part to play. I have a few notes. Not notes. There are not many. I'll just highlight. Yeah, finance. We need young people. You're not going to give us a high rate. Right now, the CBR is about 9.4. So the commercial banks are going to lend us at very high rates. So I think government should come and regulate. Every time we talk about something, they'll say it's a liberal economy, but there's no country that has progressed without a little state intervention. I think government should come out strongly about this. Infrastructure development, we appreciate what's going on right now, but infrastructure that's happening is going to the oil areas, and yet one of the things that affect production is infrastructure. Basic roads from Chadamkaka to the main center, just because, we're very agrarian.
Chadamkaka has a vice president, by the way. Okay.
We're very agrarian, and agricultural produce is very perishable. So you have to be able to quickly transport this stuff from the farmer to we also the regulatory environment. You're not going to charge us exorbitant taxes.
There's this youth who's this person who's been online and wants to maybe give a comment, and the technology was giving us issues. I hope my producer has sorted that, so let me try to reconnect with them again. Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
What's your name, sir, and where are you calling from?
Yeah, actually, my name is calling from.
Okay, could you go right ahead with it?
I think most of what this persons are saying is true. But I think the more serious thing is for them not to know what to do, that they actually can change their life. Okay? Now, yes, people refer to foreigners, coming in, that sort of thing. The economy is not in their heart. But what do we mean here? Because if you look at the resources, for instance, land, which is really a very important resource, who owns much of the land here? It's the Ugandans. It's the smallholders. I think the youth need to be grounded into society with the rest of the people. What they need is guidance. Okay? First of all, and this guidance and opportunity has to come from probably bigger people. You see, if you look at out, there is continuity. So people have businesses and they build family businesses. And then the youth just carry on. But today, there is a break between the elders and the youth. And that is a very, very big problem. They don't know their roots. Most of the youth are here in town. They are not connecting. The youth who are educated, like these I'm looking at, are not connecting with the youth in the rural areas. And there are many reasons for that, the educational system. Because you see our education, when people come and get degrees, they really don't want to look back in the rural areas. It's that easy, you can't go there and you can't relate to these guys.
Thank you very much. Let me take maybe just one more or two so that my guests in the studio who can respond. I have a call online. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, good evening, sir. What's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm Sam from Mubende.
From Mubende?
Yeah.
Okay, the line is not very clear, but let me see if we can hear a few things you have to say tonight.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Are you hearing me now? Okay. Hello?
Oh dear. Yes,
Hello?
Yeah, you are listening to your own echo, sir. So you have left your TV volume high. If you turn down the volume to do not bring an echo. So for that matter, we can't have a conversation because your volume is high.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I am.
Oh, very good. You are hearing me now.
Go ahead.
All right, I am cutting off you because what you did was you turned up your volume after the phone going through, and for that matter, it is causing an echo, and that echo is repetitive, and it's confusing you. So normally what happens is that if the phone goes through, you just turn down the volume. You don't turn it up. Okay.
I was still.
Yes.
So another important thing is legal reform. Women's land rights is something that's really important. Women make 80% of the people who are involved in agrarian business, and yet they can't own land due to patriarchal and all the other systems, societal systems that are in place. Legal reform also, I'd also talk about the investment code, which refers to an investor as a foreigner. I think Ugandan people can be, I think you can invest in something, and I think we should be given, the law has to be clarified and said, you don't have to be a foreign person to be an investor in this country.
But you just said that because of the CBR rate, which is so high, if you go and pick, for example, a loan from the bank to pay back at 20-something%, with the electric tariffs are so high, with corruption that is so high, chances are that the business will not, see the second anniversary.
All
because
these things are interlinked. They're interconnected.
You're proposing a package.
I'm proposing a package. That's why it's highlighted. Yeah, legal reform, women's land rights, and also development of skilled vocation is important. I can't say the sole problem we have in our employment sphere is the education system. I think production and exportation will create more jobs than actually the education system.
Okay.
I think just an addition to the package that could be created, the question of social security in the country. One of the things that are very, very evident, you have very many young people, for example, who are working as, say, housemaids, nannies, house help, and all this. But to what extent does the social security policy of the country protect them? But even the young people down there, person in Katwe, down somewhere who is not really recognized by the law because of their financial input. And as such, the law will discriminate them. So there needs to be a readjustment. But there is my golden bullet. You know, the Bible says that blessed is a nation whose Lord is God. It is very, very important.
For God and my country is our motto.
Yeah, and you know why it's important. So
And
don't
I think
trivialize it.
on that one we are
No.
good.
You see, before even we trivialize it, it's important for us to shape our identity, to understand our identity.
As whom?
Because again, our identity as people in God, all right? And
Does
as
this
children.
cater for the other religions? Because
Obviously, I'm talking about one definite God who is the Lord Jesus. But the point I'm really making is that we need to understand our identity, because even when we go back to interrogate all these questions, very many Ugandans, because of the lack of a high esteem, they will go to Kenya and they do the low-level jobs. They will go to Rwanda and do the low-level jobs. Now, you can blame it on either side that you want to do. But there ought to be that clear-cut aspect. Now, the discussion here will shed a lot of, almost everything is lost. But you see, there is a beacon of hope. Not all is lost for our nation. I can actually assure you that the days ahead of us are very, very brilliant. We are having a very, very clear future. Nobody should lie to you. Actually, you're going to see a total overturn of what you're seeing now. What you're seeing the systems as now as though they are collapsing, actually it's ushering us into a new presence and a new glory of the Lord, which he wants for this country, actually.
Okay.
And that is the truth.
He's a politician,
Patrick,
this one.
I
wanted to buttress.
I can see a pastor who will be preaching, you will prosper.
prosperity goes for.
I wanted to buttress.
Which is okay. I would love to listen to that. Who wants to listen to something that you're doomed?
Yeah, all my colleagues have made the point on agriculture, and which I wanted to just nail down, even in relation to oil and this excitement over oil. 78% of Ugandans are engaged, and I think the figure is even going higher now, maybe could have hit 80, are engaged in agriculture, whether for subsistence or commercial reasons. Unfortunately, this 78% or 80% only contributes 23% of national GDP. A country cannot progress when the bulk of its population is contributing
less.
23%. The service sector jobs, telecom, leisure
50%.
industry, and so on, contribute 50%, but they do not pay or are not grounded enough to cause the kind of social transformation and structural changes, to have more people on health insurance, to have more people accessing.
How many they employ?
It's
The angle is commercial.
it's 50, but even then it's not organic. It's not grounded in the because these are transient jobs.
Yeah.
So it's not an area that you want the bulk of your population to be in, yet contributing less, and those who are in the bigger one are unable to anchor the
Okay.
so that we have a
all
national
right. Ladies
economy.
and gentlemen, our time is almost out. I'm going to
Yeah.
give each one of you to give us your concluding remarks. I'm beginning with you, Winnie, and I'll end with Daphne. You never know. Daphne could give us a spoken word. So, Winnie, yes, your parting shot.
Well, in my parting shot, I'd like to agree with my colleague on the left that not all is lost. There are indicators that this country is headed in the right direction, even though my colleague Karamaji thinks that oil is a hula baloo. Actually, economic and other evidence from other countries has shown that we are almost certain this is coming. We don't know how much it will trickle down, but yes, it's coming, and not all is lost.
It has been on its way for a long time.
2020, let's wait and see.
That's when we also
To
become
arrive with middle income.
middle income.
Yeah, we're hopeful.
What a double win. Simon Senyonga.
First of all, the nation has a very great hope. I mean, look at all the wealth of the resource we are having here on this panel, the human resource that we are having here. It's now very, very important that as a nation, we are quick and astute in identifying what the Lord God has blessed us with in the nation. One of the things that always confounds many, the rich, the poor, is that they don't know what is going to happen in their tomorrow. But you see, in a nation such as this, the Lord has blessed us that we have been able to have a voice that actually can focus us on the future, and we see that not all is lost. This is going to be a year of great investments. Now, the Bible again tells us...
In my church, you say the year of great change, 2018.
Oh, yes. Now, not even great investments. And you watch that the Uganda Investment Authority will really be in the limelight. Just watch that. It's going to happen. Now, the Bible says that when the foundations of the earth, are shaken or are dismantled, what will the righteous do? Now, the Lord has blessed us with all this wisdom. He has placed us by His grace into all these privileged positions to be able to restore hope and faith in the young people.
If the Lord you're talking about decided to actually make some kind of a forensic audit of this city, like He did in Sodom and Gomorrah, probably He wouldn't find a man. And if He uses the Lord of then, He would actually nuke it.
But let me just say just one statement. Again, even the forensic audit of the Lord, which is very, very genuine, He will clearly tell you that we're on a very clear path. And now, forget about what is going on, because the old age is closing down. The old guard is closing down. Now, you see very many brilliant young people here who are being set on a straight course. Now, obviously, for whatever we have discussed here, it will only take shape when those in authority are able to consider that actually they're not going to be the end and the close of the age. That there is a new wave of young people, there is an economic revolution that is happening, birthed by all these ideas, and it's going to take shape, it's taking shape, and actually it's going to do a total overhaul of all this.
All right, Andrew Karamagi.
Yes, I am persuaded by the theories of one Frantz Fanon, who very articulately said every generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover their mission and either fulfill or betray it. The young, youthful Ugandans of the 1950s discovered their mission and delivered Uganda to independence from the colonial masters. Another young group of Ugandans fought dictatorships that characterized our early independence history, overthrew those and installed fresh governments. Another young group of Ugandans who purport that they were 27 also found their own mission, and it's not up to us. We can have conclusions about whether they have betrayed or fulfilled their mission, but they certainly identified a mission and went out to prosecute that mission. We of this generation must equally discover that mission and choose either to betray or fulfill it. I invite all of us young people to fulfill that mission of a better Uganda where opportunities, solidarity, access to services and so on are not privileges but rights, and affordable and accessible to all.
All right. Let us end with the Daphne Arinda. And if she so wishes, why not with this with a spoken word? And Daphne, I'm going to give you camera one so that you tell Ugandans, maybe in a minute or two, your concluding remark.
Well, my concluding remark is no one is going to save us. As youth, we have to stand up and fight for what is ours. And we do this by being the best that we are. We cannot continue to be a part of a system that frustrates our effort, but we can stand above it in a way that elevates us beyond it, Yes. We can find purpose in our smallness, in our insignificance, and we just have to be prepared because it's going to be a tough journey. We're going to be diseased and poor and beaten, but brace yourselves and save yourself. No one will save you.
I've never been so optimistic holding a show like this, like I have been today. And even when we see maybe rough seas coming, if I can pick something from Daphne, if it's going to be a wave, let us ride on that wave. Let us not allow the wave to bury us. We can ride that wave. And when young people fight, I think they fight not because they hate each other, but I think they fight because they love Uganda more. And now, for us who are older, I suppose we shall see at the tail end of our lives a better Uganda, because these young people seem to be more focused I'm optimistic that Uganda as a people, we shall get there. Good night and God bless Uganda.